So it's 2 weeks after the CCC now, and I thought I should do a little recap video. Showed you all my training leading up to the race, and I thought it'd be really awesome just to talk through the race a little bit with you guys now. Let you know my thoughts, how I thought it went, how I felt during the race, and how it went down really. And yeah, my thoughts afterwards now, and then what I'm leading into, what's next for me and what's the next goal. So CCC came 23rd overall. It's a 101 kilometer ultra trail race, part of the UTMB series in Chamonix. So if you haven't seen my training videos, you can check those out, guys. They're on my channel. I think there was 15 of them in total, so quite a lot of content to work through if you haven't seen them, but it showed my preparation leading up to the race. So as you guys saw, you know, I put a lot of work into training. I was really dedicated, really focused on this race. I wanted to do really well. It's been some of my highest training volume that I've probably done consecutively leading into a race. And leading into it, I was feeling really good. I was feeling really strong. I knew that my climbing was probably better than it had been in a long time. My descending was feeling good. So overall, I was feeling really confident, really excited for the day. And yeah, it was definitely something that I've been looking forward to for a while, and I couldn't wait for it. So race day came, we're all lined up in Courmayeur, and I was feeling pretty good, and it was definitely an amazing experience just to be there at the start of the race, ready to kick it off with all these guys. So leading into the start of the race, I definitely felt like I was, you know, the first climb felt like I was working a little bit harder than I would typically. I'm not sure if it was the race itself or maybe just the scenario, but something didn't feel 100% in my body and didn't feel like I had that kind of race day freshness that you're really hoping for come a big race day like this. The day itself was really tough. The climbs were incredible, but leading up that first climb, I definitely felt like I was working a little bit harder than I should have been perhaps, and then the rest of the race kind of felt like this. Felt like I wasn't quite as comfortable as I'd like to be usually. So after the first climb, we'd all kind of settled out into our positions. I was found myself probably in about top 20 by this point, so I was feeling really happy with that. It's definitely where I wanted to be and where I wanted to stay for the rest of the day, within that kind of top 20. Leading into the race, top 10 was certainly in my mind, was definitely like the A goal. Obviously the A goal would be to be even better than that, but top 10 was definitely realistically my kind of A goal going into the race. But sitting in top 20 after that first long climb, which was really tough, really challenging, sitting in top 20 definitely felt pretty good, and then leading into that first descent. Riding out the rest of the race then out of Courmayeur on the Italian side, I was feeling pretty good, definitely moving well, felt like I was relaxing into the race that little bit more. But one thing that really hit me about CCC, which I have never really experienced in an ultra before, and I have ran some competitive ultras, was just the sheer intensity of the competitors and the amount of elite runners within the field. You know, coming to this race is, as I've mentioned, you know, one of the biggest 100-kilometer races in the world. It felt like any point in the race, if you kind of stepped off the pace that little bit, let yourself relax for a moment, you'd have one or two runners flying by you, and it was the same for you. If you put that pressure on, you catch someone up, but you know, obviously going into a race like this, you need to pace yourself well throughout, and you can't be doing any kind of crazy moves like that too soon. So this was mentally a very exhausting experience within the race for me. I thought it took a lot of energy to really stay focused and concentrate perhaps that little bit more, a little bit harder than I have in ultras in the past. Typically within ultras, you know, the spaces will be created, the gaps will be created, and you can find yourself running your own race pretty relaxed, without that kind of constant pressure of opponents on you. CCC was definitely a different idea of this for me. So leading down for the Italian side, I was feeling pretty strong overall. I was feeling pretty good. I was moving well. I was definitely within the top 20 at this point. I'm not quite sure on my actual placing, but like I said, just lacking that kind of gear and that freshness that I was hoping for with regards to race pace. Felt like a lot of people were perhaps breezing through it a lot easier, and I felt like I was working harder. I was able to maintain my pace, but definitely started to have that sensation that maybe I'll pay for it later in the race. But by Champex-Lac then, got over that halfway mark, felt like I was still holding my own pretty well. I think I was still within that top 20 perhaps, maybe taken over a few people along that way, but a few people have definitely passed me as well. And by this point, within an ultra, you kind of have that sense of how the day was going to go. And leaving Champex-Lac then is when I really started to feel a little bit of struggle, that first kind of low point within the race then. Out of the climb there, leading up towards the top, I started to get a little bit cold, got a bit wet, a bit windy. I had to stop for a moment, getting caught out in the rain, take my jacket out of my bag, get my gloves out, couldn't feel my hands, and this is probably the first time in a long time that I've been caught out in weather conditions like that. It wasn't that extreme, it really wasn't as bad as UTMB, but for me, myself, I just really struggled with the cold within the race day. Definitely something that perhaps I should have thought about leading into the race. You know, I've always put a lot of preparation, a lot of emphasis in making sure I'm ready for the hot temperatures, making sure I'm well adapted to any heat that I might come across within an ultra, because that's always been something that I've had to face before doing a lot of my races in Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, but yeah, coming across into Europe, obviously, even though it is the summertime and CCC, UTMB has been really hot in the past, those weren't quite the conditions that we were having on race day. Later then, into the race, again, struggled a little bit with the cold then, but allowing myself to really kind of push on. I wasn't losing too much time with too many positions, and I was taking over a few athletes as well. So it's really towards the back end of these ultra races where you'll get stronger runners who are finishing strong coming through. You get guys like me maybe that are maintaining, and then people that are slowing and that you're passing. So I was definitely still maintaining. I just didn't have that fight quite left in me by this point in the race. I was still really competitive, still wanted to give it everything I had, and certainly was doing that, but just still was lacking that little bit of extra edge. So then into the last aid station where I'd be seeing my crew, Valacin, managed to change my clothes, get those wet clothes off, which had been a real pain for me within the race. I guess something that had been making me pretty cold. So leading up the last climb then, I got caught up by Rashid, 5-time winner of the NDS, so it's incredible to be running with him. Managed to keep contact for as long as I could before himself and another runner pulled away slightly just towards the top of the climb there, and I did lose contact. So by this point then, I had dropped back a couple of positions again, which is obviously a bit demoralising this late in an ultra, when it feels like you really can't push on as much as you had. Looking back on things, at this point perhaps I hadn't eaten enough. Maybe it had been a few hours where I'd let my energy drop. I was still drinking Tailwind, still having the occasional gel, but when I look back on that part of the race, there was definitely some points where I just wasn't getting the nutrition that I needed. I had at least 4 or 5 gels on me, which I should have had within my stomach at that point in the race. So that was definitely something that I really neglected towards this kind of 2/3 into the race. I really should be focusing more on nutrition, something that in the past I've always been pretty good at. But I feel like perhaps it was because of the cold, perhaps because of the temperature conditions, which I wasn't 100% used to running in. Just kind of lost my appetite there a little bit when I really needed to feed it, to get the energy to pull me through into the last little stages of the race there. The last climb's always the toughest of an ultra, but coming into that last aid station, I knew it was nothing but downhill from there. So 8 kilometers into the finish of pure downhill to move well, to pick up the pace into that last descent and hopefully catch a few people. So that's what happened. I was definitely moving well down the climb. I felt really strong and really good on this technical terrain. Even though it was dark, it was cloudy, I was definitely pretty confident by that point in the race no one's going to pass me, and I could try and make up those last few positions in the later stages of the race where maybe a few people let their guard down. Obviously people are exhausted, and finally it felt like I had that spring in my step I'd been searching for a long time. So I managed to catch one runner up, catch another. I think there was 2 runners I caught up, and then leading into the last kilometer, I could see Rachid just ahead, see his head torch bobbing around. So I started to run pretty hard. I think I found myself heading down towards some tempo pace there in the later stage of the race, leading into the finish then only being 10 seconds or so behind Rashid. So finishing 23rd in 12 hours and 10 minutes. I'm really happy, really pleased with the result. It's really consistent with my ITRA scores from the rest of the ultra season this year, and it was important to remember that coming into this for myself, I felt like, well, I'd only ran my first 100 kilometers last November, so in that space of time I've run 600 kilometers this year amongst some other races as well. So it's been quite a busy racing year, and perhaps in hindsight this might have been something which I would have been benefited from doing less races, more focus on the races to really search for those higher performances. So I'm really happy with the result. 23rd is a good time, a strong effort, but definitely want to improve on that next year. So in terms of lessons of what I think I've learned from this race, there's a pretty long list, but I'm going to cut you guys into some of the most important ones which maybe you can think about leading into your future ultras as well. So training had been pretty spot on, had some great volume, some great time on legs, and obviously at altitude as well, so I was feeling really strong in those regards. But perhaps in hindsight, what I should really focus on a little bit more, which I kind of neglected, which was kind of difficult with where I was located up in the mountains there, was getting in some more flat speed, some more pace, maybe even some more track effort. So I really felt on race day, I just didn't have that speed in the legs, which maybe I've taken for granted from my track days for a little bit too long, and I haven't really worked on it or developed it as much as I needed to. I did some hill efforts, did some high threshold runs on the hills within the mountains, but because of the altitude and because of the steep gradients of the runs as well, it meant that I just wasn't lacking that speed. I had the lungs, the heart that felt good, and the strength on the hills, but didn't have that leg speed. And that leg speed was definitely an important component which I really overlooked leading into CCC. The downhill trails that I'd been training on were really rocky, really technical, and not always as fast as they could have been. So leading into CCC, this was something that really surprised me. I knew the course would be a lot more runnable than what I've been training on, but it was really quite fast, really quite speedy, and a lot of sections. There were a lot of descents, a lot of downhills, which were as easy as running on the road. In hindsight, definitely leading into next year, leading into future ultras as well, definitely going to make sure we incorporate more flat speed, more flat tempo work, and even some VO2 max interval efforts on the flat, maybe even on the track, because this is something that I enjoy. I enjoy doing the flat speed. I enjoy feeling flat. I enjoy having that flat, fast speed within my running, and I think it's something that would only benefit me leading into these races. Perhaps leading forward in some more hill efforts, but on less steep gradients, so making sure they're still runnable, so around that 10% or below gradient is something which is definitely more the focus leading into future ultras, and obviously keeping that specificity there depending on what the ultra is. The heat was a great factor in my training this summer, and something I really enjoy training in, but I should have been training in some cold conditions, some wet conditions from time to time. Obviously not purposely seeking it out, but being in a climate that obviously provided both would have been perfect. So leading into next year, preparation for this race, I think I'm probably going to try and situate myself within the Alps for some training time leading into the race. So whether that's Chamonix itself or somewhere in the Aosta Valley, in that area of the Alps where you've got the hot temperatures on the hot days, you've got some great weather, but definitely you've got those rainy days as well, which I want to make sure I'm getting out, I'm getting running in, just to get that exposure into the body, which I just wasn't quite prepared for CCC, because I just haven't been in it for so long. And one last lesson I want to talk about is wrecking the course. So this is something I didn't have an opportunity to do this year leading into the race. Even if I've ran this race before, as I have run the CCC now, but leading into next year, I definitely want to spend more time on the course itself, wrecking out the course, so I've got an idea of where to push, the climbs that are ahead, the technical sections that are ahead, perhaps even figuring out the logistics a little bit more of the aid stations that I want to focus on, what I want to have at each aid station, really break the race down into those little segments, even perhaps setting myself time goals between the segments to really keep myself on target within the race will be a really beneficial thing. And this is something I want to really imply into future big ultras like this, when the competition is high, and when you really are focusing on that A game, A goal performance, and really want to get the most out of the experience. And if I have the opportunity to do that, that's definitely something I'd like to focus on. Overall, it was a great performance. I'm really happy with it, really stoked, really proud. 23rd at CCC out of 2,000 runners or so is a great result for sure. But moving forward, the goal next year, I'm hoping to return back to CCC. A lot of people have been asking me, will I go back and do UTMB? Right now, UTMB is definitely a goal for the future, something I can't wait to run, but I feel like I really want to try and focus and nail that CCC race that I really wanted to have this year before moving up a grade in the races there. So I will be putting a race video out for CCC, managed to get some cool footage from the day, not filmed by myself, but filmed coming into the aid stations and leading up to the race and after the race. Yeah, so make sure you look out for that, guys, so subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. That'll be coming out pretty soon. If you guys want to check it out, my race, you can always find me on Strava. Do a lot of Strava breakdown videos of my training as well, and I know that a lot of you guys enjoy that, so make sure you head into the links below, follow me on Strava, see any training that I'm leading into my future races as well. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, guys, the little red button, press it. It'd be really awesome to have you along, to follow along for more training, more race videos in the future. Could drop me a follow on Instagram at Harry Runs. If you're interested in coaching, you can always get hold of me at harryrunsuk@gmail.com, and you can check out my website harryruns.com as well. Thanks for watching, guys. It's really great to have you along for this. Thanks for the support all the way through the race, and obviously thanks to my sponsors. It really means a lot, guys. Thanks for the support, and I hope you guys are having some fantastic adventures of your own. Happy running.